Thank you very much to all the organization for this kind invitation. It's a real pleasure for me to share with you some of the results of this project, RESCCUE project. I will focus the presentation of one of the main important outcome of the project about modeling and risk assessment related to pluvial flood management. I hope to capture your interest in this brief presentation of around 40 minutes, more or less. The RESCCUE project. It was a project funded under the European H2020 program. It was a very big project of with a funding of more than 8 million euros, 4 years of duration, 18 partners from academia, technological centers, small and medium enterprise, large enterprise, services operators, and 3 municipalities involved through their resilient office in their city, Barcelona, Bristol, and Lisbon. The project was coordinated by Aquatech from Suez Group in this time, now from Veolia Group. At the end of the presentation, I will share with you a video about RESCCUE, and also the link with all the collected results in terms of methodologies, in terms of tools, deliverables, guidelines, etc. The RESCCUE toolkit link. Okay. It was a project related to urban resilience and focused on multi-hazard analysis and comprehensive risk assessment. As you can see in this slide, we focus on a large set of climate-related hazards, but in this presentation, as said, we will focus on flooding, and within the flooding, we will mainly focus on the treat of urban pluvial floods, with strong interest for severe floods. Within the RESCCUE project, we tried to perform very comprehensive risk analysis, including several types of impacts produced by floods. So we assessed tangible and intangible damage, direct and indirect damage, and as innovation, the cascading effects produced by failures in the urban drainage system of these 3 cities. So cascading effects on several main services like electrical system, for example, transport system, but also waste collection system, etc. Of course, apart the typical impacts on people, on pedestrians, on vehicles, and also damage assessments for assets, for parcel, for buildings. So we've tried to provide a quite comprehensive assessment of the potential negative impacts produced by urban pluvial floods in these 3 cities. We followed, RESCCUE projects followed a double approach, in the sense that here you can see the structure of the project, typical structure in several work package. So at the beginning, we had the climate change scenarios as drivers to be used for advanced and detailed modelings to perform hazard assessment and also multi-risk assessment. Then we defined several adaptation measures with special focus on nature-based solution in order to reduce hazards, but also we analyzed the effects of a large set of measures. One of the main results of the project was a collection, a database, a platform for of adaptation measures to face with climate-related impacts. So adaptation strategies to reduce hazard and risk produced by flooding. This was performed using a very detailed approach, while on the other sides we use a more holistic view, a more holistic approach, let's say holistic resilient assessment, to have a first diagnostic of the problems of the cities in terms of the behavior of its main urban services during crisis events. Of course, the approach could communicate and share information. And finally, all this knowledge was used to develop 3 resilient action plans in the 3 cities, and also to produce, let's say, a manual or a guideline for the elaboration of a resilient action plan, of course, related to climate resilience. In this approach, we focus on climate resilience. One of the main innovation that we used in our in this project was the use of integrated models of, or let's say loosely coupled models, in the sense that we used the output of the pluvial models, so the outputs of the hydrodynamic models in terms of flow depth, flow velocity, flood maps, etc., as input, so to feed other models related to other services. So in this sense, we used the output of the hydrodynamic models to feed transport models, electrical models, waste collection models, in order to analyze the impact produced by the poor efficiency of urban drainage system during heavy storm events. So the idea is to use these cascading models or loosely coupled models as a chain to analyze cascading effects from one services, in this case urban drainage, to other receiving impact services like transport, electricity, waste collection, etc. And this is the case of Barcelona, for example, where we develop a very detailed 1D, 2D urban drainage model that was used to provide flow depth and velocity in all the analyzed domains. We analyze all the city of Barcelona, around 100 square kilometers. And these outputs were used, of course, to assess social impacts for pedestrians that can circulate or cross flooded streets in this during this kind of events, but also the impacts on vehicles. So the impacts, social impacts on vehicles, we assess the possibility for a vehicle to be dragged by the flow, and we also include economic impacts, so impacts on properties, on the assets of the city, and assayed on three main urban services: electrical system, transport system, and also waste collection. From the results of this second layer of models, let's say, we assessed cascading effects in terms of economic impacts due, for example, to increase of traveling times or a failure of an electrical system, etc. And finally, you are seeing at the bottom of the slide, we use also the outputs of the urban drainage system to analyze the water quality into the receiving water body, the Mediterranean Sea in Barcelona. Again, in this case, we are looking the contamination, the pollutant produced by combined sewer overflow in the city. And here we analyzed also this data in terms of periods when the beach of Barcelona should be remain closed, and these times, these periods was traduced in loss in terms of loss in monetary terms for the activities that are related to the beach. So we tried to analyze also these environmental and economical impacts due to the water quality deterioration produced by combined sewer overflow. I will explain part of the results, but if you are interested to have a deep knowledge about the result of this project, you could find more information in these special issues, integrated assessment of climate change impacts and urban resilience. It was a special issues published as main outcome of the project, when you can find the methodology to analyze, to assess climate impacts on each one of these main services, and also the effects of the adaptation measures that we propose to limit these impacts, cost-benefit analysis, multi-criteria analysis among different adaptation measures, method for the prioritization of these measures, etc., etc. Okay, moving to the main issue of this presentation. As said, we developed a very detailed 1D, 2D overland flow. We used InfoWorks in ICM. As said, the model covered all the city. We introduced main pipes, so main sewers, but also secondary pipes. We also introduced the concept of dual drainage, in the sense that we modeled 1D sewer flow into the underground drainage network, but also its interaction with the 2D overland flow. The links between these two layers are represented by graded inlets and manholes. We characterized these elements using experimental equations developed at the Technical University of Catalonia in Barcelona in Spain that allowed us to characterize flow entry, but also the overflow in case of pressurized piped conditions. A detailed digital terrain models, as you can see, with a resolution of 15 centimeters. We introduced all the elements of a very complex, let's say, very complex network. So a lot of gates, a lot of storage tanks, for example, etc. This is the calibration, let's say calibration on the right, validation on the left. We used a lot of sensors, more than 20 rain gauge stations to calibrate the models, and tens and tens of flow meters into the drainage networks. So as you can see, the calibration validation were quite good, but it is solve the problems into the network outside. So for the 2D overland flow, we used social media information, in the sense that, for example, in this picture, we are remarking, we are plotting the water depth in a specific cell of the 2D domain, and these values around 30 centimeters correspond on the height of the flow depth recorded by a video available in YouTube and recorded at the same time of these events used for the calibration occurred at the end of July of 2011. Another example, this is a crossroad between Diagonal Avenue and another important street of the city. As you can see here, we have pressurized pipes with a piezometric, with an overflow, and the piezometric level that reach the height of let's say 1 meter, maybe above the terrain. In this case, we are validating the 1D, 2D models using this kind of data. So reports from the police, firemen, YouTube videos, photos, etc. Okay, when we developed the models, when we calibrated and validated the model, we used this model to assess risk for, say, pedestrians and also vehicles. One of the innovations of the project was the use of specific hazard and the risk criteria depending on the risk receptor. It's clear that we cannot use the same hazard thresholds for people, for vehicles, or for waste containers, for example, in case we want to know where they are dragged away. So in this case, you are seeing the specific hazard criteria developed or achieved again through experiments conducted at the hydraulic laboratory of the of the UPC, Technical University of Catalonia, that show that a palm of water, so more or less 15-20 centimeters, as you can see in the first video, can drag a people when the flow occur with a velocity of 2-3 meters per second. Generally, the other criteria used in bibliography are more related to river floods. So the typical condition in river floods is to have 1 meter of flow and velocity reduced to 1-2 meters per second. As you can see, a palm of flow depth, 10-15 centimeters, linked to a velocity of 2-3 meters per second, are able to drag a person. So to suppose hazard for a high hazard for pedestrians that are crossing this street. We demonstrated with tests, hundreds and hundreds of tests in the laboratory in order to achieve this kind of specific flood hazard criteria to be used for pedestrians that can cross a flooded street during this kind of events. Then we cross these hazard maps, computed, developed using these hazard criteria with vulnerability maps based on indicators like population density, the presence of vulnerable infrastructure, as school or hospitals, the percentage of people with critical age, and percentage of people, of foreign people that could not understand the alert and the message for evacuation, etc. These indicators were used also in other European projects like flood site projects. And then finally, we produced qualitative risk map using a classical risk matrix. As said, we have to change the hazard criteria when we change risk receptor. So in this case, we used again other hazard criteria related to the most common vehicles that we have in Spain, the Seat Ibiza, these are medium vehicles. And of course, we have a critical flow depth at which the vehicles could lose its stability due to the flotation, but so absence of velocity. But when we have a flow with 2, 3, 4 meters per second, again, we could have the situation, the same situation, a similar situation respect to the pedestrian one. So we could have instability or this dragging phenomenon for water depth around 10, 15, 20 centimeters for this kind of vehicles and this kind of situation. So we changed flood hazard criteria for this new risk receptor, in this case vehicles. We produced new hazard maps. We crossed these hazard maps with, in this case, simpler vulnerability maps, only based on the exposure, on the vehicular flow intensity. In the other case, we used also the intrinsic characteristic of the risk receptor. And we perform again a qualitative risk assessment using again a classical risk matrix and achieving risk maps for several return periods, several climate change scenarios, and of course also the current situation and the future situation, considering business as usual scenario or adaptation scenarios. We also developed as said, all this information, all the papers related to these methodologies have been published and included in these special issues that I have presented before. About the economic assessment, we propose a model that differentiates the type of buildings. So in this case, you can see the first case of a building with only the ground floor. Then we have a ground floor and the basement, ground floor into basement, etc. So the idea was to find the relation between the flow depth outside the buildings and the flow depth inside the building. For this relation, we used experimental data and also opinion of the insurance experts that worked in these fields. We contracted several studies and we collected a lot of data. Then the Spanish minister that manage an entity for disaster provided us historical data for each parcel of the municipality with the location, with the claimed, with the claims, with insurance cover, etc. And finally, we developed tools that use the city parcels information that could be downloaded, at least in Spain, from the cadastral entity, and on the basis on land use map for each of the floor that we are analyzing, provide provide damage information, of course, also using the outputs of the hydrodynamic models in terms of 1D, in terms of flow depth information. And of course, we also use it, we produced and used tailored flood depth damage curves and sealing coefficients to link the flow depth outside the building with the flow depth inside the buildings. Again, this information has been published and is available in these special issues. As possible remarks, as you can see, we considered a large set of land use. We 14 or 15 land use to be used because, as said, we performed this analysis in all the city of Barcelona with all the potential land use that we have generally in a big city like Barcelona. And these tools and all this knowledge allowed us to create these risk maps, these times in terms of tangible damage, so economic risk assessment. We produced these maps in aggregate forms just to avoid problems with the data, but originally we had the data for each parcel, but we decided to present, agreed with Barcelona municipality, this information for district or for neighborhoods, etc. Again, you can see in this case the tools and the methods were published on another journal of hydrology. Here you have You have the DOI and the title of the work. We also performed the risk assessment on vehicles. Why? Because according to the historical information that we had, we found that around 10–50% of the total damage occurred during flooding events could be related to the vehicles. So we developed a similar approach. In this case, vehicles are not fixed in the domain, so we worked with a density, a potential density of the vehicles in each district, street, etc. And we use, in this case, existing flood depth damage curves related to vehicles, and we performed again this kind of economic risk related to damage on vehicles. About cascading effects on surface transport system. In this case, we worked with Exeter University. They are a specialist in this kind of analysis, and we use the outputs. First of all, we have these rules. In case of having a flow depth from 0 to 10 centimeters, we could consider that the maximum velocity is allowed. Then for a flow velocity from 10 centimeters to 30 centimeters, we consider the maximum flow velocity of 20 kilometers per hour. And finally, for more than 30 centimeters, we considered the streets as closed. Okay, so flow depth, this flow depth output from 1D to D drainage models. This kind of information allowed to feed a dynamic transport model used by the transport departments of the city of Barcelona to calculate the speed reduction in the street, in each street, for several return periods, for several scenarios, again, current state, business as usual, and adaptation scenarios, and then translate this information in monetary impacts due to the speed reduction, but also environmental impacts like the increase of fuel consumption, etc. For the cascading effects on electric system, you can see again the scheme. We had the electrical location. On one side with the coordinates, with the typology of the electrical infrastructure. On the other side, we add the 1D, 2D outputs. Just to remark, we used always flow depth in these cases, and we used the fragility curves that are like vulnerability curves, but related to the to infrastructure. In this case, fragility curves for substation or distribution center, etc. In order to reach the failure or not of this kind of infrastructure, and this kind, in case of a failure, we calculated the customers affected and the cost generated by this failure. Just to remark that, of course, one of the partner in our consortium was the company that managed the electrical system in the city, and also the Catalan Technological Center for the energy and the electricity in Catalonia. As done for peoples and vehicles, we also performed the analysis of the stability of waste containers into the city, depending on the percentage of filling of each of these containers, and we analyzed the potential stability of these elements in the city of Barcelona. Here you can see the type of instability, sliding, toppling, etc. We also tried to validate these models using again reports, videos occurred during real events. And finally, as results, we could provide, let's say, a more comprehensive fluid risk assessment in terms of intangible damage, like, for example, the high risk area for pedestrian, for vehicles, in terms of increase of this area for the future, in terms of return period, etc. For the tangible damage, as said, we focused on properties, vehicles, but also indirect damage. There is another publication about that, but all this information was expressed in terms of expected annual damage, and in this expected annual damage, for example, were some results related to transport, to electricity were included. And as final remark, during decades, we considered that the lack of information, of physical information, topographic information of our urban drainage system supposed their neglection in the assessment of flooding. For example, in Spain, the flood directive avoid to consider severe floods and pluvial floods in urban areas. And the reason was, of course, related to competence, but also related to the lack of data. In this moment, more than 50% of the Spanish town and city have urban drainage master plan, and this percentage is more than 75% in case of big city. As demonstrated also by the claims of this historical data that we used, the damage produced in urban areas by pluvial floods, mainly severe floods, correspond to more of 15% of the total damage claimed in Spain related to flooding. Many times, at least in the south of Europe, it's quite difficult to distinguish between ephemeral water courses that there are channeled in pipes with respect to classical severe drainage. So many times ephemeral water course and severe pipes live together in our urban environments. Another remark is about the return period. In the south of Europe and in Spain, for example, the classical return period values used for the design is 10 years. So it's enough. It's quite important to be taken into account in this kind of analysis. These projects provide, let's say, innovation in terms of methodologies, tools, and impact models to perform this kind of analysis. We were invited to flu directive working group to explain some of the results of the project. It seems that people there were quite interested to this project. One of the remarks that I personally did is to use specific hazard criteria and specific risk criteria depending on the risk receptor. It's not coherent to have one hazard maps or one risk map for vehicles and for people, for example. It's that no sense. And I think that we are in the epoch at the time to use also this kind of coupled models to be calibrated, to be validated using the dual drainage approach, the elements of the graded inlets to be characterized, etc. Of course, we have to use these models with maybe high computational cost also for planning. These models maybe are not able to be used for operation, but for planning and to help the decision makers, I think that we could use them. And just to inform you that Aquatech, we will lead another project in this line. It is the Icaria project, more focused on critical assets, not services. So the idea is to develop asset level models, so significant importance, significant focus on modeling, advanced modeling, and the inclusion of critical assets in the model. In this project that will start in January 2023, we have again 3 case studies, this time all the Barcelona metropolitan area, also Salzburg region in Austria, and an archipelago in Greek. As you can see at the bottom of the picture, again we will analyze several climate-related hazards, and again the effects on strategic urban services. As novelty, natural areas or green infrastructure will be considered the same both as a risk receptor, so as an important infrastructure or critical service to be impacted by climate-related hazard, and also, of course, as adaptation measures. And it is all from my side, just to remark the consortium of this new project. Again, we will collaborate with our colleagues from Exeter University. And it is all. Thank you for your time. I think that I respected the timing, and more than happy to explain or to clarify any doubt that you can have. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Russo. It was a very good presentation. We did a lot of analysis, and I didn't know that you could collect data and dynamically linking those utility services and transport maps, which is very good to know. Please give any questions you have in the Q&A boxes. While we are waiting for some questions, I have one question, Professor. What level of satisfaction did you receive from those 3 cities that you have applied, from the local councils or the administrative bodies?
First of all, we have to remark that we selected these cities because they had a city resilient officer, so a coordinator, a key player in in the world of the resilience. So these cities had a pathway, a previous pathway, previous to rescue project. And so the work during the project was easy in the sense that we had clear the operators, the people to provide information, the requirements, etc. In these terms, the degree of satisfaction was, I think, was quite high. For example, we developed a resilient action plan, including all this information and helping to define or to stress the needs of some adaptation measures. As we have seen, climate change impacts could increase economic and social risk of around 30, 40, 50% respect to the current situation. In the case of Barcelona, the results were also used and included in the last urban drainage master plan of the city. So all the methods, all the methodologies, the models, of course, was used for a practical use and will serve to justify investment of millions and millions of euros. So I think that it's a clear response to your question.
Okay, and you mentioned in one slide that in south of Europe, you prescribe more than 10 years design, 10 years return period design standard, whereas in UK, this is 30-year plus climate change. So in Bristol, did you use this 30-year plus climate change standard for Bristol study?
No, it's true that at least during the last years, the standard return period criteria have increased in the north of Europe after several decades that were more close to 5, 7, etc. In Bristol, it's true, we used more restrictive return period around 20 or 30 years, but we have to consider that all the existing infrastructure was designed with maybe lower return period. In Spain, we use these values, 10 years. It's a common criteria. In few cases, 25, but just in case of critical points, sag points, flood prone areas, or tunnels, or this kind of things. And of course, these return period are related to future rainfall, future design rainfall. So we, let's say, we are applying this return period to maybe increased yetograph due to the climate change factor that we generally apply to take into account climate change effects on maximum rainfall intensity.
So what sort of climate change uplift do you do? What percentage, or how do
we developed 3 different studies of local. We need to perform a local study to achieve these factors. In 2015, we used a climate change factor of around 12% for all the blocks of the yetograph. In the RESCCUE project, we achieved climate change factor for each block and each duration of the rainfall. But the climate change was ranged from 10% and 50%. And in Madrid, we found more or less a similar values, around from 7 to 9%. it's around 10–15% the result, the climate change factor that are currently used in Spain for a return period of 10 years.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. And we've got a question from Roger Swan. He's into specifics of your presentation. What is cadastral.cat files?
Okay, this is an information about the parcels, the polygons of the parcel that that is available from the cadastrian organism that manage the properties in Spain. So you could access to this web page. Of course, you have to proceed with the login, etc. But you can download this information freely, and we use this information: the polygons, the information about, for example, the age of the parcel, of the properties, the number of basement, etc. So it's useful information for the economic damage model.
So another question, like, for the economic cost, that vehicle damage and all this, did you compare that against the insurance database? And how, if you do so, how did it compare your model prediction, the predicted cost and insurance claims? And
yeah, here the methodology for the damage assessment of vehicles exposed to flooding in urban areas. In these articles, you can find a tentative of comparison. Of course, in this case, it's quite difficult to compare these kind of things, but we add the data. So for a specific events, we have the data, in this case, not in Barcelona, but in Badalona, a city very close to Barcelona. This validation was done before the RESCCUE project in another European project, the Bingo project, and we validated our results comparing the modeled damage to the historical ones. This historical data that I have cited before provided us damage not only for the parcel, but also for the vehicles. Generally are parked vehicles on the streets, because another thing is the presence of vehicles into the basement, into the underground parking. We are considering, in this case, flooded vehicles on surface. We removed all the noise, all the other data, and we focused on this kind of data. Honestly, I think that we reach the same order of magnitude, but it's a starting point. Okay.
Of course, it depends on how many
detail
people...
you can see the publication, of course.
Okay, thank you very much. And one last thing, observation. Great to see that you've been using the social media footprint to validate. And on this note, I would encourage everyone, every participant here, to upload any flooding photo in urban areas, which is a great use for validating overland surface flow. And a question for you, Professor, how did you do the search of open source web data, like social media data? Did you use any specific tool, or how did you get on with that?
A previous comment. I think that it's the unique way to replicate this kind of analysis in other sites. After RESCCUE project, we developed this kind of analysis, for example, in Malta, Ireland, without severe flow meters, with very few rain gauge data, etc. So we developed the model using, let's say, the common sense, but then we need the validation of these hydrodynamic models. The unique way to do that was the use of crowd media sourcing data, and we use, for example, Google Map information, street map, and very important, civil protection reports. So no specific data, at least we are not so specialist in this kind of data, but I think that this is the way, this is the unique way to face with this kind of problem.
So I'm mindful of the fact that we are heading towards the end of our time. So thank you very much, Professor, for giving us some time. It's good to know that what advanced research going on in this space, and looking forward to get more of findings from your new project. And please let us know when you are in a position to present your findings with us. And thank you very much, everyone, for attending this webinar. Just before you go, to remind you that we've got our SciUM AGM, branch AGM on 3rd of November at midday by Zoom. And it's free to register. Please go to SciUM website and see you all there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your invitation. It was a pleasure. Bye.